Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. It's been another amazing week. There's always something going on, isn't there, in Scottish politics? And we've got lots to talk about. With a by-election pending next Thursday, that will be in our discussions as well, because that's turning into something quite interesting. So let's, without further ado, bring in our panel, starting with our favourite lawyer up in Clickmannon. It's our Eva. How are you doing, Eva? You're not in Clickmannon, are you?
No. Since we spoke earlier today, we've had a wonderful drive from Clackmannanshire to Oban, and now we're in Ballachulish, looking onto the Ballachulish Bridge that my dad helped to build in the 1970s, and can't stop thinking about that earworm I've got, which is the song, I'm sure you know it, The Portree Kid by Bill Hill, but made infamous by him and by Corries, and you'll remember the reference to somebody who'd been a river gambler on the Ballachulish ferry. So it's all good stuff today.
Excellent. And over there in Edinburgh, we've got our Mr. Quinnan. How you doing, Lloyd?
I'm very well, but it's been an interesting week. British politics come to Scotland.
Oh yeah. We're going to talk about it as well. And if we're going to have a discussion about that, we have to bring in our tub thumper, Mr. Petrie, up there in the city of discovery. Alan, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing quite well. Had a very eventful week this week. I was up in Perth and I was speaking to a great lady and a very good friend of the show, Alison Rollo. And I also went up to Stirling yesterday to meet some more smartfolk. The events that we were at will be disclosed in the near future. But there we also met Gordon Murray and his two children, Grace and George. It was really good meeting you all. And I know you had an accident on the way home, but I'm so glad that you are all okay. And it was only the car that got damaged. So glad you got home okay as well.
Yeah, that's from all on the show, Gordon. Glad that. Sorry to hear about your terrible accident, but great that you all get out unscathed. Cars can be replaced. People can't, especially good people like yourselves. And there, Miss Shirley Cote de Brig, here he is, I believe he's in La Belle France, Mr. Boswell. Or Monsieur Boswell, should I say?
Yeah, it's France. It's all changed. It's coming to an end, this project. So the next assignment will be, don't know. So at the moment, I'm just wondering about doing some a wee jolly down to France because it's a likely next candidacy for the next assignment. Italy, Germany. It's great. I'm dead lucky. Dead lucky. So I'm scooting about. Might be over in the States. Might be in the Far East. Hopefully I'll stay somewhere near Europe because I've become rather fond of it. Us Europeans. Although it'll be EFTA, not the EU, of course, until they sort the shit out.
Correct. And we don't want the Far East because we don't want to start being recording our prisms at 3 o'clock in the morning again. We don't want that.
That'd be mad. I'd be the one that'd have to adjust, of course.
Well, we didn't think I was going to do it, do you? Two crowns and a pip, you old chap. 2 crowns and a pip, pulling rank. Anyway, let's talk about this week because this, I mean, as we're saying, it's an interesting week. Everything's going wrong the world just now. I mean, poverty is at an all-time low or an all-time high, rather. People are in really dire states. Energy bills are through the roof. I had Anne-Marie Ward on during last week. Really interesting lady. Telling 19,000 drug deaths, the highest in Europe, in Scotland. Glasgow, our beautiful city of Glasgow, is absolutely decimated with people dying from drugs overdoses and everything's going on there. We've got a war going on in Ukraine, one that I've opposed from day one, and I've been wanting to see a peace treaty and a ceasefire and the killing to stop. We've got a genocide going on that the British are supporting down in Palestine. And, however, what, Eva, did our people in Holyrood, with all this going on, poverty, drug deaths, wars, the possibility of World War III, everything going, and they decided what they wanted to talk about. Mr. Harvey brought it in. He was berating the Scottish Parliament from banning men and women's toilets is the bottom line, that a lot of these people in Holyrood said they were so confused after the Supreme Court ruling that they didn't know which toilet to go to. not very good.
This is a major concern if people don't understand that there are only two sexes, male and female, and you're either one or you're the other. But this entire episode has been absolutely shambolic because there are several elected politicians and some who lost their seats last year who are refusing to accept the decision and the ruling from the Supreme Court on the very fact that there are indeed only two sexes, that the meaning of sex in the Equality Act of 2010 has always been biological sex. So the law wasn't changed by the Supreme Court. They affirmed, they confirmed, they reasserted that it's always been biological sex when you talk in terms of single-sex provision. And that's particularly opposite in all the areas where the Scottish Government and related institutions have made an absolute backside of the whole damn thing, particularly in prisons, for example, where there will be, and there already are emerging, compensation claims from women who've had to share with men. There will be other claims from children in schools where there's been toilets that boys have been allowed to use. There are problems within the Girl Guides because they too fell foul of the gender ideology position. But ultimately, what we've got when Grangemouth has closed, we've still got the two-child rape clause, bedroom tax, we've got the furore about the winter fuel payments. What are our politicians doing? But debating access to toilets within the Scottish Parliament because the Scottish parliamentary body decided to follow the law. And so a number of politicians, including Keith Brown, my MSP and deputy leader of the SNP, signed a letter drafted by the former SNP MP Hannah Bardell, who felt terribly sorry for our trans siblings and the confusion and the hurt that had been caused by the Supreme Court confirming that sex means biological sex. Now, if that hurts you, there is something seriously wrong. But in a political context, more than half the population of Scotland are women. And these women in the main are entitled, these women are all entitled and in the main have been demanding that single-sex provision means just that. And that's said in the face of a man running a rape crisis centre, a man telling women that they had to leave their bigotry at the door if they didn't want to share sessions of counselling with men claiming to be women. And it's all about self-ID. And the reason the Scottish Government cannot accept the ruling of the Supreme Court boils down to two things. One is ego, and the other is compensation claims. And what should come before all of that is that the government should do the right thing. That debate the other day should never have happened. There was a sequel to it a couple of days later, and it was absolutely disgusting when you see that what it's about is about women asserting their right to have single-sex spaces, to keep men out of children, girls and women's changing rooms at swimming pools or in gyms or in shops. You know, these are aspects of life that affect everybody. And the reason why we have single-sex provision is for dignity and safety, security, comfort, because the good men stay out so that the bad men stand out. And that's something that Patrick Harvey and all those others who support him, and again I'm going to quote Keith Brown, had better think very, very hard about before next year's election, because this will continue to feature when it ought not to. Next year's election should be about far more than something as stupid and time-wasting and diversionary as this.
Oh yeah, quit. The enemies of Scottish independence, Lloyd, always point out, the Mickey Mouse, the parish council, you don't do anything. And then these guys go along and, we've got the Parliament issuing and, the Hollywood, but we will not police the trans toilet ruling, the MSPs are told. They won't do it. They start debating things like this, as I say, with all the things that I've mentioned and Eva added to, it just makes a laughing stock of Hollywood and the movement, doesn't it?
Of that, there's absolutely no question, Roddy. I mean, this is the collateral damage of 10 years of cult-like behaviour by both the Scottish National Party and the Scottish Green Party under the aegis of Nicola Sturgeon. And what we're now beginning to witness is such a clear, massive gulf between the priorities of the people in the street, the electorate, the voters, and the elected politicians. But in some ways, this is no surprise, because when you develop the type of political structure that was created within the SNP, whereby only those that are absolutely and totally and completely loyal to the leader are able in any way to advance themselves in the political process, then what you end up with is, after 10 years of people convincing themselves that the things that they'd known for their entire life prior to becoming members of the Scottish Parliament or members of the SNP, that they reject everything they believed for the sake of accepting this new theory, this theory of gender politics. Now, in political terms, this is going to, as Eva has said, this is going to damage the SNP particularly, the Green Party, but more importantly, the movement for national independence is going to be corrupted by this, and there are many who would believe that that's the reason that it was introduced. But on a political level, I despair for what advice the current First Minister and, remember, leader of the Scottish National Party is actually getting, because immediately the Supreme Court made its decision, there was the opportunity to absolutely break with the past and move forward and create a clean slate situation where we wouldn't have even had these two debates. Or had these debates come up, the answer to each and every question is we are now following the law because the law is now clear. Gender does not exist other than as a human construct, and that sex is the reality, and that all laws in our country have been based on the concept of male and female. You know, even down to the laws on murder and the laws on culpable homicide. You know, all of these things arise from the straightforward truth that women are adult human females and men are adult human males, and there is no other division whatsoever. Now, fair enough, there may be respect for people who see themselves in a slightly different sense, and they are covered by the Equality Act, but the reality is here. The Scottish National Party, under the leadership of John Swinney, had an opportunity to completely break with the past that was created by Nicola Sturgeon and the cult, and to give himself the ability to move forward as a brand new leader with a brand new vision, in which case Humza Yousaf had done him a favour by dumping the Greens out of the cabinet. There was no requirement, and there still is no requirement, for the SNP dog to be wagged by the Scottish Green Party tail. It's absurd, and it's going to be electorally difficult, if not disastrous, if this drags out and drags out and drags out. I mean, I'm minded to think of, you know, when I was younger, and Japanese soldiers would appear from the jungles of Southeast Asia, you know, 30 years after the war was over, only because they wouldn't believe that the war was over. They were being lied to. Now, I get the impression from the Hannah Bardells, the Jenny Gilruths, the mad wifey and, what's her name again? Kirsty Blackman, the whole of the Green Party, Emma Roddick, these people in the Scottish Parliament and in the SNP group at Westminster who are behaving like, I believe his name was Haru Onada, was the last Japanese soldier to pop out of the jungle in 1975. They're doing the same, with an ideology which no longer has traction, other than the traction they are giving it, and it's it's self-harm. Stop it, John.
Yeah, but these people, Phil, I mean, like Patrick Harvey, Emma Roddick, all that we mentioned, and of course, not forgetting Sturgeon and Hannah Bardell, who said, "Oh, it's so confusing, the ruling." There is nothing confusing about it. Since we were up in the trees, before the human beings even come onto the ground from the trees, they knew, a male knew a female, and a female knew a male. And it's easy. If you've got a willy, you're a man, and you go into the man's toilet. If you're a lady, you've got a flower, and you go into the ladies' toilet. How is that confusing, Phil?
Well, it isn't. And
No.
the important thing here is that we've got to remember that there's a reason why women and girls need safe spaces, because of the physical development and the testosterone. When you look at children as they grow, and young kids are almost the same. As soon as you hit, they're identical, almost the same. And as soon as they hit puberty, the males grow much faster. Testosterone kicks in. It's one of the reasons we die 8 years younger. But the upper body strength of males, typically, not always, there are some exceptionally strong and gifted women, but mostly it's the damage that males can do to females. Women and girls need safe spaces, because most of the violence, ironically, most of the domestic violence is the next call. It's female on male, but it doesn't cause damage. What causes damage and serious danger is when a man goes all out, is much more powerful normally, ordinarily, than a woman, and causes serious damage. And that is why women and girls need safe space. Culturally, we've known this for a very long time. It's only right. It's what a civilized nation does. It looks after its own. And for these people to deny that on some crusade that is, I don't know where they think they're going, but they're delusional, and they do not represent what the majority of the people in Scotland want. You're there to represent the people of Scotland, not your own mad ideology. So sling your hook. On your whole poverty and energy bills and World War III, and these guys are still talking about this crap. Excuse the pun, the toilet the different sexes could use. But you also mentioned in the intro, Roddy, Anne-Marie Ward, great work she's doing. And speaking the truth, more power to you, Anne-Marie. This is the kind of person Scots deserve in politics. It's the likes of her and Eva that should be front and centre, instead of the entire leadership and cabinet of the SNP, all the Greens, complete waste of space, deceivers, liars and chancers, a lot of them. An excellent line from Eva, I loved that as well. The good men stay out, so bad men stand out. Superb. That should be the mantra for here. But Harvey's comments and actions, as well as that of the SNP, shows that this is a Mickey Mouse government. There's absolutely no doubt about it, and I use that I use that very loosely. That term, government. They're not really government. You know, it's a big council. It's more like an episode from Loose Women than a serious political party bent on a cause. So we cannot rely on SNP to deliver independence, or the Greens. They will no doubt continue to find some other cause to champion, like their current campaign to unify with the other unions to challenge reform and thereby retain the status quo. Yeah, that's right. The traitor Swinney would much rather unify with Better Together than unify with the genuine independentistas. So down with this clown. We've known this for some time, and every other one that supports devolution. Remove them from the SNP. This is not what the SNP was invented for. It's not what it stands for. But they would have you believe they still stand for independence. Lies. They're devolutionists. But it's becoming the devolution party because that is what the leaderships in Sturgeon have sold us out to. So to hell with them all. I would remove them all from politics and deny them any part in fighting for Scotland's independence unless they start doing something about it. So for me, bust them all down to private. Get them back in the trenches, prove yourself once again, and then maybe you can climb up once you've proven yourself and straightened up and flown right. Meanwhile, people suffer. And this is something that we've talked about and everybody's mentioned it. We try to check our facts. So I commend, as ever, as we all do, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and their humanitarian work. Look at, please, the April 2025 briefing titled Children Being Left Behind. Deep poverty among families in Scotland. So there's 80,000 in Scotland live in households that are in very deep poverty, and that's the defined term. This is around the population of children aged 16 or under in the whole of the city of Edinburgh. This report explains why this is happening, and moreover how we can fix it. It looks at the particular drivers of this hardship and how we stop them. It serves as a plea to politicians, all politicians who approach the 2026 elections in Scotland, to do better and radically improve the lives of these children who deserve far, far better. We need to take responsibility. It is us, we who have caused this situation for not standing up and fighting and freeing this country from the shits, the state it's in. train spotting again. As child poverty targets, they loom. You know, these targets were set by the SNP. Children are being left behind, and I'm reminded of George Carlin's American Dream on there. Check that one out as well. It's too high. 1 in 4 in relative poverty once you take out the housing costs. And in 2016, the Scottish Parliament unanimously, of course, talked the talk, but have they walked the walk? They agreed to set the child poverty reduction targets. We now know that the interim targets that they have set have not been met, and progress thus far has been too slow. So it's appalling. So independence, nothing less, no more lies. SNP need clearing out and reinstated as the Independence Party or destroyed. It must work with the wider independence movement, and the only people I trust to do this and put our children first and our country first is Liberate Scotland and Indie for Indie.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed the Phil Boswell show there, folks. Ours Phil. When he gets going, marvellous stuff. Well done. Great stuff. Every word I agree with. Alan, but that's it. People will mock our parliament and our democracy. That's what these people are doing. Instead of being serious politicians, they're behaving like students at a debating society.
In 2007, Alex Salmon changed the Scottish Assembly to the Scottish Government. He changed the Scottish Executive to the Scottish Government. And what have they done now? They have just brought it back down to a Scottish Executive in a Scottish Assembly, because that is all it is. And we have known since 2015 that the British were back in control of the Scottish Parliament as soon as Sturgeon took over. And that's what's been happening. But what a lot of people don't know is here in Dundee, for example, they have just got £15 million from the Health and Social Care Partnership, which deals with the most vulnerable children in the city of Dundee. Yet we have this executive wasting money, because every single time a question is asked in that parliament, it costs thousands of pounds, because the amount of civil servants that are dealing with finding the answers to these questions, and it is just wasting time and wasting money that should be spent on other things. But it's also been used as a deflection, because while they are dealing with stupidity, all the real issues are going unnoticed. People are now being drawn into what toilet should people use. Well, like Roddy said, if you've got a dick, you know which one you're going into. It's as simple as that. There's no ifs, there's no buts. And let's make it quite clear. The Supreme Court did not overrule the Scottish Executive. What they did was explain to the Scottish Executive what the law said, and that they were breaking the law. So there was no overturning of anything. The Scottish Executive overreached by breaking the law on sex. The Supreme Court said, no, this is how it works. It's biology, and this is in law. But the other issue here, and why Patrick Harvie is pushing this, is because one of his very loyal trans friends is now challenging him for top of the list in Glasgow. So that's a loyalty you get from these people. Patrick Harvie is bent over backwards, pardon the pun, for them. And the thanks he gets is somebody's trying to remove him from his job. But the other two that I've been paying attention to is Maggie Chapman and Mercedes Van Alba, I think her name is, both on the North East Scotland list. And I will be taking great pleasure standing against them in 2026 to remove both of them from their seats. And I'll be doing that because the adults are coming into the game. Liberate Scotland are now here to get rid of this Mickey Mouse politics and push forward what the people of Scotland are wanting. And that is us to be split from the Westminster Parliament and regain our independence. So, folks, it's on the tin. Liberate Scotland. You know how to vote.
Yeah. One of the things I was watching, and for any of the viewers, a thing called Say Nothing, true story of the Price sisters during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Excellent television programme and based on true stories, so really worth watching. But one of the things the Irish always said, Eva, was that, England's problems are Scotland's or Ireland's opportunities. In this case, it's our opportunity. And Reform attacked Anas Sarwar. So the extreme English National Party of what they called this week, they're not called Brexit, not called UKIP. Yeah, that's right, they're called Reform this time. We're fighting with the British Labour Party. And what happened? John Swinney, so-called leader of the independence movement, de facto leader, he's attacking Reform for attacking the British Labour Party instead of shutting his mouth and letting them cut each other's throat. What was the man thinking?
Well, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but John Swinney ain't no Don Corleone, is he? What's gone very badly wrong here is that John appears to have forgotten that Better Together was a coalition of unionists, of which Anas Sarwar was part, along with those who run Reform. So John needs to think again, look in the mirror and look deep into his heart and soul and remember what he was elected to do. And it was not to cozy up to unionists. It was to do everything within his power to make Scotland an independent country once more, not a county. And you see, what's really nasty about all of this is John Swinney just doesn't seem to understand that those unionists that he's sooking into are laughing at him, and they're laughing at Scots, and they're taking the absolute mickey at every opportunity by, as we know and as we say every week, stealing our resources, ignoring our priorities, and using our bounty, whether it's from the North Sea, or it's wind and wave energy, or it's income from whiskey, or seafood, or tourism, or whatever it is. All that money that flows down to Westminster is used to satisfy the priorities of Westminster, which is in fact the English government. Because let's remind ourselves, Scotland has devolution, Wales has devolution, Northern Ireland has devolution. The only country within the United Kingdom that has no devolution is England. It doesn't need it because it controls Westminster. England controls the purse strings. English MPs make the decisions that impose their rule upon the other constituent parts of the United Kingdom. And that is why a united campaign for our independence in the form of Liberate Scotland is crucial. It is vital, because I rewind to Anne-Marie Ward and what she talks about, the thousands upon thousands of Scots who suffer and die as the result of addiction, as the result of poverty, as the result of homelessness or care experience, or they become involved in criminality as the result of growing up in poverty, generational, deep-rooted poverty, which, as Phil said, is getting worse. And this is untenable. And this is why John, standing up for Anas Sarwar, was completely out of order and absolutely unacceptable. Anas Sarwar is a member of the Labour Party. He prioritises the Labour Party's needs. He prioritises the union over the good of the people of Scotland, because anybody with half an ounce of common sense understands absolutely that Scotland will be a brighter, happier place when we run our own affairs and we have full control of our own resources. And Anas Sarwar is an enemy of that form of democratic rule for Scotland, comprising independence. John Swinney, think again.
Absolutely. We've called this show, Lloyd, this week, this podcast, Toilets, Turmoil and Treachery. Now, I just don't understand why any alleged leader of an independence movement, and every week we show more and more acts of Britishness by the leader of the Scottish National Party. Can you explain it for me? Because maybe I'm missing something.
I don't think I can explain that because it's unexplainable. If you are the leader of the Scottish National Party, it says in the tin, very simply, your job is to deliver the sovereignty back to the people, to engage in a campaign which will lead to our independence and membership of the United Nations. Clearly, having his second bite at the cherry, John Swinney still comes nowhere near meeting any of those possibilities. Having suffered under John's leadership as a member of the Scottish Parliamentary Group between 1999 and 2003, all I'm seeing here is déjà vu. John, in that period when we were the second party to the Labour Party, never seemed to have the idea or the understanding that you don't talk up your enemy, and if you can avoid mentioning them at all. That's the first rule of politics. Do not operate on the enemy's ground. Do not mention their existence, for goodness sake. How did this campaign start for reform? When John knew that the by-election was coming in Hamilton, so he called for a summit to defeat reform. He started off by talking about reform. He gave reform the platform. Now, I don't know, supposedly that political genius, Stephen Noon, is advising John. Now, I was on the selection course for the Scottish Parliament in 1999 with Stephen Noon, and I was impressed by him, and he was very bright. Unfortunately, 27 years later, I have to say he's an utter and complete imbecile. That's all there is to it. If he's the one who is providing the current advice to the current First Minister, the whole idea that John has spent the time since the death of Christina McKelvey talking about reform just exposes yet again the amateur nature of John's leadership style. Now, there are those, many, who believe that there's some great conspiracy going on here. Well, I mean, I might buy into that at some point when somebody produces some evidence, because all I see, and from personal experience of having been managed by John as the leader of the Scottish National Party, both out with and within the Parliament, is I just see a man who is incompetent, who will look at what he did on reform and say it was the right thing to do, because I am the First Minister of Scotland and we can't have these nasty people coming here. So it is my responsibility to draw in fact, it's the words he used. It is my responsibility to draw the country together to meet this challenge. No, John, it's not actually. Your job is to deliver the saltire between the flag of Saudi Arabia and Senegal outside the United Nations building in New York, sooner rather than later. But I despair. I genuinely despair at watching the shambles that is the Scottish Cabinet, the shambles that is the SNP effort in Motherwell, in Hamilton rather, and I'm reminded. In September 1999, George Robertson, Lord George of Islay, or in Ellen, or Port Ellen, whatever he is, he decided to toddle off to become the boss of NATO. So there was a by-election just a few months after the election to the Scottish Parliament. And unfortunately, Annabel Ewing had not been elected to the Scottish Parliament, but she was chosen as the candidate in the Hamilton by-election. And pretty much all of us, Annabel included, believed we did not have a chance in hell. Robertson had a 16,000 majority. At the end of the campaign, Bill Tynan, do you remember him? Anybody remember Bill Tynan? No, you don't. Of course you don't. He was a one-stop member of the Westminster Parliament. The Labour Party held the seat, and Annabel didn't win. But I'll tell you what, we were screaming, jumping, leaping. We were so happy. We reduced 16,000 to 652. 652. And how did we do that? By not talking about the Labour Party, by getting our activists. And remember, at this time, the SNP membership was somewhere between 18 and maybe 22,000 at the time, right? Not 125,000 that had been in 1974 or the 125,000 it was post the referendum in 2014. But we had, I know because I was there, we were all on a rota to be there. Yeah. And there was an absolute minimum at that time of 60 people a day coming into the rooms and then going out to work. And that was the Monday to Friday. Come the weekend, there were in excess of 350 members of the Scottish National Party knocking on doors, tramping the streets and manning stalls in that area, in the area of Hamilton. It was Hamilton South, actually. Now, that's what got us from a 16,000 Labour majority to a Labour majority of only 652. That was because we had the ability to mobilise our activists. We had the ability to excite people because we were on the road. We'd forced the British to give us a Scottish Parliament. We had done reasonably well in May of that year. We had 35 members of the Scottish Parliament, and we believed, as the ordinary activists of the party did, that we were on the road, and we should have been on the road, because when asked after the election, Alex Salmond, then, he was then still the leader of the party, was asked what he thought. And he said, and these are his words, "If we carry on at this rate, we will be an independent country by 2007 and we will have a majority SNP." Sorry, I got it the wrong way round. "We will have a majority SNP government in 2007 and we will be independent by 2008. Those were the words of Alec, because he knew that the machine that was the SNP in those days, the machine that delivered the Scottish Parliament, is not what it is now. And the reason it is not what it is now, because there is no focus whatsoever on independence. Everything is about doing British politics better than the British. Now, if John thinks that that's the way forward, then I'm sorry. You have to lose the leadership of the SNP for the second time, John. You should never have been given it a second. You should never have been given a second chance. And the reason I say that is very simple. Liberate Scotland, Sovereignty, Indie for Indie, the Independence for Scotland Party, and the many, many activists I know who are currently non-party aligned. Those are the people that reduced the 16,000 majority for Labour to 652 votes in 1999. They're no longer in the SNP, which is why the SNP cannot maintain or indeed run correctly a campaign that needs feet on the street, boots on the ground. They've decided to go down the route entirely of social media. If you believe you can win elections by social media, you're a fool. That's all there is to it.
Absolutely. And it's feet on the ground that Liberate Scotland are going to use. Because if you've been following it like me, Phil, what's happening in Hamilton, and I've noticed all these pictures where they're using social media, it's the payroll. I go back to, I remember I was in that campaign with Annabelle. I was like, all the people there working on it. Nowadays, all it is the payroll. There's not the mass boots on the ground.
That's absolutely true, and these comments here are bang on the money. And sorry, folks, I'm having a beer because I'm on my holidays, a long weekend in France,
and catching up
with some colleagues. But we do take this very seriously. If you knew the story of today, folks, hats off to all here. Respect, because everybody has their day been buggered about. By God, it was fun today. But never mind, that's how it works. You got to fight for the cause. It's not going to be pain-free, folks. We've got to get right into it. Lloyd on the Hamilton and Annabelle Ewing story, brilliant. Proves we can do this, and we proved it again in 2016. And make no mistake, this was a victory in 2016 for and by the people of Scotland, not the 56 that were selected to head down to Westminster. Eve is also correct. England is laughing at us, and especially the clowns in charge of Scotland's big council, the SNP Scottish Government. This is a continuation of what Daniel Defoe said in 1707 at the Act of Union. The Scots will be allowed to send to Westminster a handful of men who will make no weight whatsoever. They will be allowed to sit there for form's sake, to be laughed at. It continues today with these clowns. They were scared of Alex, they're scared of us, but these bozos that are currently in charge, they've got their claws in deep, and they are traitors to our cause. Virtue signalling, this is what it is. By the SNP, of course, all sensible and decent people abhor racism. So the whole alleged racist attack on Labour's Anis Sarwar, why is Swinney doing it? It's virtue signalling. And what actually happened here? The National even led with a story. Nigel Farage's party used selected parts from a video of the Scottish Labour leader reacting to a claim that he said he will prioritise the Pakistani community. as it targeted voters ahead of the Hamilton-Larkhall-Stonehouse by-election on June the 5th. It's followed by a clip of him saying, and the quote is, "The days where South Asian communities get to lead political parties and get to lead countries is now upon us." So you can see what the right wing are trying to do. They're trying to rumble up discombobulation, racism, and all the crap that goes with it. However, Sarwar did say this, and it is worth the watching. And there's no doubt this was selective by Reform, but Sarwar is suspect on many issues, and this is one of them, especially given the Indian community's take on what he's done and said and where his priorities lies. These are difficult subjects that Alan mentioned earlier, that we need adults to talk about and address these issues, not talk about who can go into what pisser. I mean, what a load of crap, excuse the pun. But Alan's 100% right. We need people that are willing to address the difficult issues and be taken to task on them. That's what our people need. That's what a civilised society requires to progress. 100%.
We need, actually talked about earlier, we mentioned Anne-Marie Ward. People like Anne-Marie Ward, Nevas and the Allens, that's the people we're needing in there in the Parliament, not these bloody half-wits. And that's what they are, half-wits. But just to kind of maybe elaborate upon Phil's little talk there at the second, the problems we've had. As you probably know, ladies and gentlemen, we switched softwares because the price of the software that we were using had gone through it, but increased the year before by 100% and 100% and then 400%. And we went, no, we're not paying that. And we went to a new software, which has been giving us lots of problems. And today it just went tonto. It was behaving like an SNP, MSP in a debate about toilets. It just was a nightmare. And so we had to re-record, start again. And then we went back and we paid the extra money and bought the old software back, although it's extortionate. Because as my old mother used to say, it's dear to buy cheap, and we found that out. So the old buy me a gin signs up. We need help, folks. We had to spend a bloody fortune. And we've got another one we've just finished paying for. So if you've got a couple of coppers in your pocket, hit the old buy me a gin. And I stress again, because it has been asked, no, it isn't. I buy my own gin, honest. It's cheapest chips here, cheapest chips. Alan, I've actually, to get back where we are, the leader of the Scottish National Party running to the saving of his opponents. The SNP actually filed the formal complaint, not the Labour Party who were attacked, but the SNP, they filed the complaint. Maybe you can explain it to me, because it doesn't work for me.
Well, John's just tried to make himself the British enforcer. That's exactly what he's doing. He's forgotten what his role is as the First Minister of Scotland, which is to free us from the Westminster system. He now wants to be an enforcement officer of the Westminster system. But we know what this is about. John has got his canvass results from the by-election. He knows that the yes vote are not coming out to vote. So what is he doing? He's appealing to the Labour vote, unionist votes, not to secure independence for our country, but to secure another seat for his party. Because that's what John is worried about. Seats for his party, not seats for independence. Now, there was someone put a post up on Twitter earlier on today saying, if you don't vote for the SNP, it's like refusing to buy your dream house because of the wallpaper. I have a different thought on that one. And that is, voting for the SNP to gain independence is like trying to use your car key to open the door of your dream house. It just doesn't work. It's as simple as that. And I would say to those people who are thinking about voting or keep pushing vote SNP 1 and SNP 2, put your brain in gear first. Try putting it in reverse first, so as your head slowly comes out your backside so you could see a little bit clearer. Because it is quite clear that voting SNP 1, SNP 2 is the unionist dream. If you want real change, you've got to vote for it. And the only people who are giving you that opportunity for not voting for MSPs, but voting for the liberty of our country, is liberate Scotland. So please put your brain in gear and vote wisely.
Yeah, and this is exactly, here we go. If you look at that there's my wee pal, wee wishy-washy. There's it's all payroll there. You know, there's Chris Lundy from Barhead, Nielsen up Lamura, councillor, and there's Katie Loudon, there's Kate Forbes, there's Jim. Help me here, folks. That's all practically all payroll. That's the problem.
Jim Fairley.
The fake
Jim Fairley. I couldn't remember. Jim Fairley. Well, that's who's there. And it is, but you know, there's nothing surer either that you're going down the wrong road, when the uber loyal British of all British papers, the English nationalist friend and the Daily Record, is promoting you. The Labour Party giving the SNP a front page exclusive there. Labour can't win this by election, so if you want to beat reform, no, we don't want to beat reform. We want independence, you clown. But he's on the Daily Record. Does that in itself should tell any SNP voter or supporter where the loyalties of John are, and it's not to Scotland.
It's quite funny, but it's also very sad. In my teens, I worked in a paper shop, and I knew perfectly well, as a supporter of Scottish independence at that stage, that the customers who got the Daily Record and the Sunday Mail were not likely to be politically motivated to the same extent as I was, putting it mildly. And talk of earlier campaigns reminds me of one of the best I was ever in. I've spoken about it before. 1992 with Andy Brophy for the Ocho seat. And the reason that we did well then was because we were a team of people who absolutely bust a gut day in and day out. All of us had jobs or were at uni or college or something during the day, and at night we did all that we could possibly do. And then we took time off work or off uni for the last couple of weeks before election day. And what we did was we were engaged with the public. We covered the entire constituency several times. We were organised in terms of having what we used to laughingly call the hit squad and the flat foot brigade. We had young men who had wee vans, transit vans, Ford Escorts that we would all pile into and go in convoys to different places to talk to people. We go to bowling clubs, we went to pubs, we went to the bookies, we went to boutiques, we went into the bakers, we spoke to people absolutely everywhere to deliver that message. You did that, Roddy, Lloyd, Phil, Alan, we've all done it. Many of the viewers of this programme have done it. And sadly, so have many of the elected politicians of the SNP who watch this programme. And the hard, horrible fact of the matter is, those who are now running the SNP forgot who put them where they are and why. They forgot the roots. They forgot the principles that made people adore, and I mean adore, Winnie and Margot and Jim and Alec and all the others, far too numerous to mention. But the real Scottish nationalists, the people who didn't just have dedication and commitment, they had intelligence and they had integrity. And if they stood and told you they were trying to do something for the betterment of this country, you knew damn fine that you could believe every word and you could have every confidence in these people. That is not where the SNP is today, but it can be if they rediscover their roots. If they don't do that, other people will take over from them. So for the time being, the best answer for Scotland, for those who believe in independence, is liberate Scotland. But what it reminds me of is about the small folk of Scotland that assisted at the Battle of Bannockburn all these hundreds of years ago, and go and stand at Bannockburn Field like I did yesterday and look up at the statue of Robert the Bruce and remember who he was and why. He wasn't a monarch of a country. He was a king of a people, and he led them to the freedom that they needed, that they deserved, that they fought for, and they backed him to get. What we need now is collective leadership that instills confidence in the people of this country and the people of this movement. We need people who are competent, who are driven, and who are courageous, who will not be blackmailed, who will not be backed into a corner, who will not sell their souls for a crock of gold. We don't need a parcel of rogues. We need the normal, ordinary people of Scotland to have the courage and the power and the confidence to really have hope and put hope over fear and trust those that they know are committed to independence. Because I don't want to be an MSP. I don't want to be the First Minister. I want to see Scotland independent. I want to live the rest of my life in an independent country. I want to see that day that Lloyd talks about when that saltire is raised between Saudi Arabia and Senegal. I want that passport that says Scottish citizen. I want to stand in an airport queue and it says Scottish rather than British or European or not European. These are ambitions that are ordinary ambitions for ordinary people like all of us here and everybody watching to have. We're no better than anybody else as Scots, but we're not inferior to anybody else, and we ought not to allow ourselves to continue to be treated as inferior citizens of the United Kingdom when we can be powerful, omnipotent, democratic citizens of the independent Republic of Scotland. And for that reason, I implore everybody who supports independence to think very carefully about your 2 votes next year. Make sure that you vote for an independent supporting candidate on the constituency and an independent party or organisation on the list. That way we will deliver independence and we will create Scotland as the country we know we can and should be.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember 2015 when we got rid of Jim Murphy. And I mean, I've got to tell you, the SNP had never been better than third in that seat in East Renfrewshire. That was our task, become third, beat third, to beat the Liberals to get into third place. It was a marginal, Tory Labour marginal. But by the time that campaign came round, I was running it in Barhead, Neilson, up the moor. We had, just for leafleting, I had 29 leafleters. And I had to cut down the sizes of the bundles all the time because there was more and more people turning up. We had a team of 15 canvassers. At the end of it, we had canvassed about 70% of Barhead, Neilson, up the moor. It gave the constituency the highest canvassing returns in the whole of Scotland. That's what it was, feet on the ground, and that's what's needed now, folks. The ordinary folk, not the corporates, not on TikTok. And you're going to have to work for it. If you want independence, you need to start helping us. We can't do it on our own. Because here's something that came out, Lloyd. The clock's kicking on, and there's so many things I want to get into today. But this comes from one of our very loyal viewers. We've all met him. In fact, we've had a couple of beers with him actually when we were up in Aberdeen when we were on tour with the Prism from Jimmy. And this was it, Jimmy Ross. The SNP in the 10 years, the general election, that one I'm talking about in 2015, 1.45,436 votes we got. 724,000 we are now. They lost more than half their vote, Lloyd, in those 10 years.
Yeah, it's. I mean, for somebody who went through the first phase of the charge of the SNP in the 70s, where the next big push and we were going to win, and then it all completely fell apart after the election in 1979. I find it astonishing that there's not panic amongst the SNP itself, but also its membership. That if we lost 1,000 votes or 14 or 1,500 votes at a council election or at an election, next election to the next one, we'd start well, no, we wouldn't panic. We would look at it and we would say, right, what do we need to do to make sure that doesn't happen? Why did those people not come out and vote? And it's something that struck me when you were talking, Roddy, that the SNP went, right, this may be kind of left field, but it's not. Part of the reason why we have a massive reduction in voting generally is because an awful lot of the time people don't even know there's an election on unless they're involved, because of a really simple thing. Posters in the street, posters on lampposts, something saying to you on this particular day, come and vote. Now, that was completely removed with, I have to say, unfortunately, the agreement in most cases of SNP councillors at council level, because these were the decisions that were made. There is not a local authority in Scotland now, since 1999 this has happened, remember, remember, since 1999, since the creation of the Parliament, that allows posters, lamp posters, the general use of street furniture for political campaigning. That's not allowed anymore. No wonder. It's not the whole story of why people are no longer going out to vote. That's certainly not the case. But if people don't know there's an election on until a couple of days beforehand because they happen to hear it on the news, whereas you used to be, it provoked debate. When you saw those posters on the lampposts, when you saw them on the motorways, when you saw the posters in fields and huge amounts of posters in people's windows and so on. But if you take that away, you're cutting out an element of debate, because for all those people who are not political anoraks, who don't, hang on the word of the party leaders or even are in the least interested, when they start to see those posters going up, then they start talking to each other and going, what's all this about? Now, if you don't have what's all this about happening, then those people feel entirely and completely disengaged. And I would ask this question: what exactly was the purpose of removing that element of political campaigning, which effectively had been historical, going back 100 years at least, of that kind of street campaigning with posters and lampposts and a sense of urgency as the day came? As the day of the vote was actually coming closer and closer and more posters went up, the smaller parties were able to get their posters out. It created the political debate amongst the people who were not engaged. Now, I think it's absolutely vital that if you want people to come back and vote again, yes, the parties have to get their message right. Yes, the activists have to speak to people eye to eye, on the doorstep. But we also need to put pressure on the return to old style campaigning, because it's not that old style in real terms, but for the very reasons I outlined. If you want people to be involved in politics, then give them something to talk about. And if it is, for instance, somebody, who will say, oh, that's those bloody posters up again, who's going to pay for them being taken down? That is political engagement. That is political engagement. The necessity to have a whispering, a chitter-chat campaign in any constituency or any ward prior to the day of the election is actually the meat and drink of political discourse. And if you deprive people of access to that discourse by simple things like saying, no, you're not putting that poster up here, then what you're doing is you're denying democracy. And it's essential that current sitting councillors, especially of the parties who are about to get a tan-in next Thursday, namely the Labour Party, the Scottish National Party, the Green Party and the Tory Party, they need to speak to their councillors and reintroduce street campaigning in the manner that it used to be.
Yeah, it was one part. My job in 1970 and the two 1974 elections was I used to shimmy up the lampposts and take down the opposition posters and tie up and get them as high as I could, so it was difficult for them to get ours down. Yes, it was me, officer, but it's too late. You can't get me now. That was decades ago. But I did it. But that's one part of it. But the other part of it is simply this, Phil, that, we had the Stuart MacDonald and Angus Robertson and Alan Smith coming out talking about cybernats and how terrible it was and how Nicola would never march because marching was bad and it reflected bad upon the party. They destroyed the grassroots. They destroyed it. And it was the strength of the SNP, as we've all alluded to, was the grassroots. And that's why, as I say, the grassroots now are fighting back. They're sick of saying, please do this, please do this. They're now fighting back. But that's what the problem is. The grassroots have been excluded.
Yeah, and it was a deliberate act. Remember that it was Angus Robertson that choreographed the removal of the power of the SNP members to vote for policies at conference. And you remove that from the people, and you look since COVID, how many SNP meetings have been held where the full body has been represented? I would wager none. They have completely removed the activists from this, and they will pay the price eventually, God willing, and we'll make sure it will happen. But this is just another piece of the puzzle. This is like, it's Swinney back by the Daily Record, right? Well, why would the Daily Record back him? He's a unionist, devolutionist unionist, but a unionist nonetheless. Why would they back him? And the SNP, under the current leadership, were a threat to the union. If they were, they would be removed, as Alex was, as Willie McRae was, as Craig Murray was. And this needs to be said. Craig Murray should be the first in any list. Craig Murray has proven he's a man of principle, a man of the Scottish people who wants freedom for our country and our people, and has given up more than anyone I know, including his liberty. Way better than any who currently sit in the Westminster or Holyrood, as is Alan, as is Eva, and Lloyd. If we can persuade you to come out at them, great, that'd be magic. But I used to look up to John Swinney, but now I realise it's only because he's quite tall. As a politician, he's a failure. The first time he was a joke, and now he's failing again. He's a real nowhere man, and I hope he sees the sun going down on the SNP. And Lloyd was right as well. George Carlin, they don't want educated people sitting around a table discussing how much we're getting shafted. Perhaps there's something in that street campaigning that the planning departments can do. I believe this is the case. There's a lot more the Scottish Government can be doing, but is not doing because it chooses not to. And back into these figures that you put out, the amassed, the 1.5 million votes and 156 at 59 seats, but they only get 724 votes. I mean, you look at how the D'Hondt system works. People need to realise this. It's designed by the Brits and designated to be used in Scottish elections, and it's designed to prevent a majority at Holyrood, to prevent independence. I mean, it's been successfully used against us, and only once has the impossible happened under Alex Salmond. SNP won a landslide of 69 seats, the most the party has ever held at either Holyrood or Westminster. Yeah, allowing Alex to remain First Minister for Scotland for a second term. Since then, it has done what it's been designed to do, forcing the SNP into a coalition with clowns like the Greens, and the leadership we've got. It's a joke. What a disaster. We will not gain a majority government under SNP unless we all get behind them, and we cannot do that until they turn away from supporting devolution, seats in the House of Lords, wacky divisor policies such as self-ID for trans kids, the destruction of women's rights and girls' safe spaces, fighting Brexit and now fighting reform. What the hell are you doing? Well, we know what you're doing. You're doing what you're told, John, because you're a shyster and a traitor. Why would they do this? They've done it since Nicola was handed the golden keys to an independent Scotland by Alex Salmond, because they are in the firm grip of the Union. We know these people, and much of what the British establishment has on these people. So with a mixture of blackmail and bribery, the Brits have made vote for SNP pointless. If you want Scottish independence, listen to what Alan's saying. It's got to be done. Know thine enemy, friends.
Absolutely. Well, it does. They have dumbed it down. That's the point. They're absolutely dumbed down in the SNP. I mean, those of you who know Craig Murray or don't know Craig Murray, is a highly intelligent, articulate man. I mean, he was one of the youngest ever ambassadors for the British government, and he gave up what was going to be a star-studded career on a matter of principle. He would not allow torture to happen in his embassy. He's been all these things. But he went to get vetted. This is in the Sturgeon era, and he failed vetting for the SNP. He was walking back from the vetting. He didn't know he'd been failed, and he got a phone call, I think, from the Telegraph or one of those to inform him, to ask him what he thought about failing vetting, and he didn't know. And the reason was they set him a trap question, and the question was, and I believe it was about, but correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure it was either about weapons of mass destruction or Palestine. Of two things that he opposes, and they asked him, well, a party policy was, for example, we're going to retain weapons of mass destruction. Would you support that? And he said, well, I don't think I could. So because he wouldn't be a party loyalist, that's the excuse they used to make him fail vetting. Just despicable. But Alan, the numbers have half. We know that 750,000 yes voters stayed at home in July, and it is because they're not getting to the people. They don't feel comfortable. They think the SNP are as bad as just the rest, and they're right.
Yeah, I mean, the SNP have just turned into another British party. I mean, Lloyd is right. If we want to win this, we've got to go back to the old style campaigning. I mean, I remember going fly posting. It was the flour and water. Nothing removed it. Flour and water was the paste. Stuck on the wall. You had no chance of removing that. That's what we did. But it's clear with the 750,000 people not coming out to vote. That's more people not coming out to vote than actually coming out to vote for the SNP. So here's the facts in black and white. A vote for the SNP is now splitting the yes vote because there is more people looking for someone else to vote for. So think about that very carefully. There's more people from the independence movement refusing to vote for the party who says its main aim is independence, despite the fact of them having a majority 2015, 2017, 2019, 2021, and even the council election 2022 had all these mandates and didn't get us 1 inch closer to independence than what we were in 2014. What they used our votes for was introducing the wokey policies and the hate crime bill, 2 issues that were never ever supported by the independence movement. They have abused and abused us far too long. So it's now time to put people into the Scottish Parliament who have one job to do. We have a bill already written to go through the Scottish Parliament, and that will be announced very shortly. That bill is very, very clear, and this union will be over. So in 2026, you know what to do. I said it before, it's written on the tin. Liberate Scotland and we will be free.
Yeah, that bill is ready. And to Peter Bell, no, I'm not going to show it to you and I'm not going to tell you about it until we're good and ready. But the bill is written and we're ready to go with it. But here's some of the reasons. One of the reasons that the Brits, Eva, their favourite tactic is at the moment is, you're a pro-Putinist, you're pro-Russia. That's your problem. You're far right. And what did John do with Mr. Farage? That has peddled Russian propaganda for years, John Swinney says. The old British tactics as well. It's quite incredible. I mean, everything he does screams British.
He's also getting above his station because he doesn't have an international position. He's supposed to be looking after the interests of the Scottish people and delivering us to independence. Now, you'll think I'm going to be in a tangent here, but I'm not, if you hear me out. I said earlier that we're in Ballachulish, so it was a long drive from Clackmannanshire via Oban to come here. And on the way, we saw seals on a rock under the Ballachulish Bridge. We saw the rapids, if you call them that, under the bridge at Connell. We saw at Loch Linney 2 sea eagles fishing. We drove through beautiful countryside, nice wee quiet roads here and there, up near Appin, where we had the windows open and the scent that wafted in was Scots pine and Scots wildflowers. We watched little finches, sparrows, blackbirds, you name it, flying all over the place. At one point, we think we saw a red squirrel. And once on these journeys, although sadly not today, we've seen a wild cat. You and I and everybody else watching this know perfectly well there are hundreds of thousands of people in Scotland that don't get those opportunities. And the reason that they're not getting these opportunities is because they live in poverty and because they are currently led by cowards who are selfish, self-centred, and in the main, gravy trainers who do not understand that Scotland belongs to the Scots and that Scotland is somewhere where it is such a beautiful country. Our people ought to be able to explore and to experience every airt and every peart of this country. That's what the small folk deserve. But instead, on our travels today, we saw tourists from France and Germany and people from Poland. There were Americans, Canadians, you name it. That's not a bad thing, except for the fact that these people who come from abroad are able to travel to and spend time in parts of this country that people born and brought up here have never visited. And think about what we could have. We could have huts like they have in Scandinavia that Leslie Ridder speaks about a lot. We could have a proper chain of youth hostels. We could be organising holidays and trips to the country, mountaineering trips, swimming, sailing, you name it, for all the bairns, all the young folk, for the unemployed, for the employed, for every person in Scotland that wants a holiday. The Scottish Government could afford to do that and to provide state-run places for them to go for some spare time. We could expand, for example, the gardens, the walled gardens and the gardening schemes that have been popping up here and there. Although we could have food banks, they wouldn't be food banks because people were poor. They would be food banks because people were producing food voluntarily for their friends and neighbours. There is so much that we could do in Scotland if we ordered our own priorities and we controlled our own resources. The money that Scotland contributes to the Exchequer at Westminster that is surplus, that does not come back to us, is enough to bankroll Scotland and independence over and over and over again. Yeah. It will cover pensions at a decent level. It will cover welfare benefits, the NHS, the education system, and the extra stuff that we need, like a National Housing Corporation or a National Energy Company. We can do all of these things once we are in control and we are in charge. And for that reason, friends, we have got to vote Liberate Scotland, Indie in the constituency, Indie on the list, and deliver that self-determination and get on and build the country.
Absolutely. And on your huts, like in Scandinavian, chalets, sounds so much nicer, Eva. Chalets, not huts. That's what we'll have. But here's the other reason. We like to point out how he's getting more and more British by the day. I want you to hear this now. I have to put my hand up. As you all know, since February 2022, I've been screaming for a ceasefire in Ukraine. The killing's got to stop, and I worry that it's getting worse. And it would seem now that the Russians are not going to stop until they've got whatever it is they want. But I want to see that to halt. But we also know it's a fascist regime in Kiev. That's just a fact. It's not deniable. But here's John Swinney, in our name, folks.
Of all the things the Prime Minister said to me on Friday, I cannot compliment enough his resolution in support of Ukraine in all that he said to me and to leaders of other devolved governments on Friday. And I applaud the Prime Minister for that resolute support. He speaks on behalf of the Scottish Parliament about the importance of us standing up to Russian aggression, protecting Ukraine and securing its future. And we will stand steadfast with the people of Ukraine in that regard.
And the clapping seals go with it. There's no doubt this is a fascist regime, and we're supporting a fascist regime for 100 years, apparently, when we can't pay decent pensions, Lloyd. Why is there, again, a Scottish independence leader supporting British foreign policy?
Because the previous leader gave them millions of pounds, our pounds. Nicola Sturgeon was the first of the, you talked earlier, Ronnie, about, it's a devolved government. You don't have an international status. Sorry, it was Eva that said it. And the British government regularly tells any First Minister or any ordinary member of the Scottish Parliament very clearly where the defining line is in international relations. That's why Angus MI6 Robertson is the External Affairs Officer for the British government through the Scottish government. What they've done here is John's just following on from Nicola. Nicola was the only devolved government that was allowed, without any cries at all from Westminster, to give some of the Scottish grant, the block grant we get, the pocket money we get from Westminster. She shaved off a slice of that to give to Ukraine. No discussion about it. It was done and then was applauded by the British government. John's just following exactly the same footsteps as Nicola did. But the horror of this is, if you were a leader of a genuine, or if your mentality was you were the leader of a pro-independence party, that you wanted to be a member of the United Nations, the very, very last thing that you're going to get yourself involved in is pissing off a member of the Security Council of the United Nations, a permanent member, namely the Russian Federation. We have no axe to grind with the Russian Federation, none whatsoever. So this virtue, again, it's what Phil said earlier, it's virtue signalling. All the European leaders are all saying Russia bad, Russia bad, Russia bad. You're not a European leader, John. You weren't a European leader, Nicola. You are the managers of a devolved administration, and you definitely should not be making enemies for future generations of Scots, because effectively every statement you make is because you are playing the game of being the leader of the country. The people in the country you're talking about believe that is genuinely the belief of the people and the nation, when it's not. You have to be more responsible when you are given these positions. Until we achieve our independence, it is not a smart move to go around pissing off the leaders of other countries, or indeed the populations of other countries. In fact, it's rank stupidity, and it's not what you would call diplomacy. We are in a world of diplomacy until we become an independent country, and then we'll be allowed to take part in the real world of diplomacy. And some of these people in the SNP currently have to learn what the difference is between diplomacy from a devolved administration, a diplomacy on behalf of a people by a pro-independence party, and what diplomacy is when you become an independent country. Do not make enemies before you're actually playing in the same game as them. That's the simple truth of this. Don't make anybody an enemy until you are on par with them, and even then, think once, twice, and considerably more. We don't need enemies. We've had one enemy for 1,000 years, and it's south of the Solway and the Tweed. The simple facts, I was talking to my daughter this afternoon, how many villages and towns were destroyed by invading English armies into Scotland? The figure is close to 20,000, right? We rebuilt them. Some of them we couldn't rebuild because the damage was so great, which is why there's a county called Roxburgh, but there is no city called Roxburgh anymore because it was destroyed. Now, sorry, I'm off on a tangent here, but it's very, very simple. Until our flag flies at the United Nations, do not involve yourself in international politics, especially when you're doing it, having your, effectively being played by the British. There is why would the people of this country have such a hatred for the Russians when in reality it was the Russians that effectively saved most of the young men who went from this country to fight in the Second World War? Without the Soviet Union, which is now it's a different thing, but without the deaths of Russians, we would not be in the situation that we are in today. They are not our enemy. Scotland's only enemy, historic enemy, is south of the Solway and the Tweed. Nowhere else.
Yeah. Well, Robert Cunningham Graham, the founder of the SNP, said better, the biggest enemy was not the English, but those among us, the Scots-born English nationalists, are our enemies. And they still are to this day. But Phil, John Swinney, ideas way above his station, as Lloyd's alluded to. And that's the problem. His ideas are way above, but he's trying to be so British.
He is. He's a complete patsy. This is the Scottish Vichy government, and they need to be deposed. I mean, you can link all this together. It's the same story. It's the same subject. They're bought and sold for English gold. It's as simple as that. There is no other explanation, no rational, logical explanation. And absolutely right about the Russians. The Order of St. Andrew, the Apostle, the first called, in Russian, it's Romanized. It's the Orden Svatogo or something, Apostala. I can't remember what it was called. But it's the highest order conferred both on the Russian imperial family as it was, but now by the Russian Federation as a state order. There is a huge connection between the Atlantic convoy with the Russians and the Scots, the Atlantic convoys, the socialist disposition, the fighting of fascism. Burns is the statues all over Russia of Burns. It's massive. There's a massive connection. We've got more in common with these than we do in Ukraine. Ukraine are fascist and right wing. What the hell are we doing? And John, this guy, I have no respect for this patsy, this clown, this waste of space, this empty vessel, this leader of a shambles. get rid of the whole of the Scottish cabinet. They're not worthy. They're players who play a game for their own benefit. Virtue signalling and climbing the greasy pole for their own benefit. You're not fit to represent the people of Scotland. Bugger off.
Correct. I should just say that my wife's grandparents on her father's side were killed by the Banderas, who were Ukrainian Nazis who fought in the Galicia SS. And it's not changed. They're still a fascist nation. Alan, this John backing British foreign policy, we had Alan Smith, Dugan, and who's the other, Stuart MacDonald out in Kiev sitting behind a Union flag back in 23 or something, talking up British national foreign policy. We had David Linden and another MP whose name's gone from at the moment, dressing up in British Army uniforms and playing at Sodgers for the day. What has happened to the Scottish Independence Party?
Well, I remember when I was a member of the SNP, we used to have a song, Scots Wha Hae, every conference. It now sounds like they have changed it to I Vow Thee My Country, GB. Because that is what they are doing. They are supporting the British Parliament every single stage of the way. But look at the hypocrisy here. John is in this country saying, let's all get together to stop reform, the extreme right. While at the same time, he's saying, let's send our young lads over to Ukraine to die for something that's nothing to do with us. Let's send our money, take it away from the kids who are poor and starving, and spend it on bombs and send it to Ukraine for a right-wing fascist organisation to use against Russians. John, look hard at yourself. Look in the mirror and ask yourself a question. Are you doing the right thing? No, you're not. Do you want to do something for this country, John? Look at reopening the Scottish Exchange. Look at organising the central bank. Start having friendly negotiations with BRICS countries and start preparing the road for independence. That's what your job is. Because if you ain't going to do it, 2026, get off this seat because someone else is taking over.
Yeah, well said, Alan. You've got one job and one job only. Liberate Scotland know what their one job is. Time the SNP did. Now we're finished. We've overrun, way overrun. And I just want to leave you one quick thing, and that is of our Prime Minister. And I think he deserves some respect, and I want to give him that respect.
I know what it means to work 10 hours a day in a factory 5 days a week.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. His father was a tool maker, and as Keir shows you, he made a tool there. And that was the best they did in that factory. Till we see you again, folks, take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.